Welcome to Selling in the Age of AI.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So,
Must-listen podcast for sales professionals who lean into technology without leaning on it. Dive into the future of sales with your hosts, the dynamic and inspiring Frank Somma, renowned keynote speaker, best-selling author, seminar leader, and business coach. Get ready for game-changing insights and strategies that value technology but place humanity at the top of the sales pyramid.
Benvenuti a tutti. Welcome everyone to Selling in the Age of AI, where we talk about the importance of technology in sales, but always emphasize P2P, relationship building and human contact reside at the top of the sales pyramid. My guest today is the brilliant Doug C. Brown. Doug has led client award-winning and high-performance teams, as well as pioneered profitable development programs for companies. He's advised companies such as Intuit, CBS Television, Procter & Gamble, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Nationwide, Embassy Suites, Inc., 505,000 companies, and thousands of other businesses and entrepreneurs. As an independent division head, Doug created, trained, and presented high-impact, results-oriented web seminars for prospects of Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. Doug increased their division sales by, ready, 864% and a close rate by 62% in just 6 months. Today, he helps companies and individuals increase their sales by incorporating sales revenue and profit growth strategies used by the top 1% performers through the Top 1% Academy Sales Revenue and Profit Growth Masterminds. He also specializes in creating commission-only sales teams and advises companies on how to properly prepare for high-performing sales teams so they can attract and retain elite sales professionals. Welcome, Doug C. Brown.
Hey, Frank, thanks so much for having me here. I appreciate it.
I got to tell you, that was quite a resume. I mean, right off the bat, you're helping nationally recognized brands like P&G and CBS Television. But I want to start with one of my idols, the great Tony Robbins gets mentioned there. You increased Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes' sales by 864% and their close rate by 63%. I mean, Tony and Chet, like, that's amazing. They are like the greatest salespeople ever. This is absolutely extraordinary. Yeah, I would really love you to take a dive into this and let us know where you began, what you discovered, what you did. The statistic is just phenomenal. Please walk us through that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Well, it actually all began, amazingly enough, I had, first and foremost, I'm a sales guy, right? Really, when it comes down to it. Right? And so, I'm one of those proud sales guys. I'm not that, and I had won a sales award. I sold a very sizable account in the telecommunications business for a company. Back then it was called Excel Telecommunications. And they were originally a multi-level marketing company, but then they went out of business, came back in, and they were a commercial company. So B2B. And I had sold this connection between New York City and Europe and everything. And it was a huge deal. And they invited me to this event that they were having down in the Biltmore Hotel down in Scottsdale, Arizona, if I remember correctly. And I'm like, sure, because they said, hey, we're giving away a free Mercedes, and there's only going to be 100 people there, so you got a 1 in 100 chance for a free Mercedes. And I'm like, okay, free trip in the middle of the winter down to Scottsdale, Arizona. You and I, you're New York, I'm New Hampshire. We know what the weather's like.
Yeah.
So I'm down there, and I didn't know, but they had hired 2 guest speakers. One was Harvey McKay, who wrote a book called Swim with the Sharks.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the other was Mr. Tony Robbins. Now, I had been a long-time student of Tony, and, I went through the Personal Power 2, Personal Power 1, Personal Power 2, all his courses prior to. So I was a big fan. I was excited. This is a guy that was my idol, right? And I'm like, I'm gonna finally meet there's only 100 of us in the room. I mean, this is awesome, right? And so he comes out on stage, he does his thing, and it's like, wow, thank you and good night. And he walks off the stage, and I'm like, here's my chance. And I go get to him, and he's got two bodyguards bigger than Tony Robbins, which is a big man.
Tony's a big guy, yeah.
No, you can't see Tony. And I'm like, oh no, right? So he goes off stage and it's done. And I'm like, ah. So anyways, I'm walking through the Biltmore Hotel, talking to a friend of mine at the time. And they say, well, hey, did you get to meet Tony? I said, no, that's what happens. And then I'm walking along and they go, well, that's too bad. I'm like, you know what? I got close enough. I got, sometimes you don't always get your goals and your dreams and I'll continue to keep trying. That's what I was saying to the person, right? And then I walk by and I look to the left and there's this really open courtyard with all grass and tables and things like that. It's very beautiful. And I look over and I'm like, that's Tony Robbins sitting all alone in the courtyard.
Oh my.
And I'm like, wait a minute, there's another person with him. And I'm like, and so I'm talking to my friend on the phone and the friend goes, you're going to do what I think you're going to do, aren't you? And I said, yes. And she said, see ya. We hung up. I walked in the courtyard and I walked up to Tony and I said, Mr. Robbins, I'd like to tell you a story. And he said, sure, love to hear it. And I told him how his stuff had impacted my life. And he said, that's amazing. He's like, Doug, this is my good friend from high school. I didn't know he was here. And we just saw each other. We're having a spot of tea, so to speak. Why don't you sit down? And I'm like, oh my gosh. Wow. And so now I'm sitting with Tony. The dumb thing is I never took a picture of this moment, but I'm sitting with Tony and his friend and we're talking. And now we're just being guys and we're joking back and forth. And I made Tony laugh so loud, he actually punched me in the shoulder, right? He was just like, whack, like guys do, So, and I'm like, well, Tony just punched me in the shoulder. So I'm now going to reciprocate. Right? So I whack him in the shoulder. And by the way, Tony's shoulder is probably 12 inches thick. It's like when I hit it, it was like thud. I was like, oh man, I'm glad we're not wrestling. And so anyways, Tony said to me, Doug, why don't you come to one of my events for free as my guest? I'd like to spend a little more time with my friend here. I'm like, hey, no problem. Thank you. And I did. He gave me the number of his assistant. I called the assistant. I scheduled the thing. And I came as Tony's guest to one of his events. And in between, Frank, and here's kind of the story, in between, I decided that his assistant was so nice to me that I wanted to do something for her. So I sent her a huge bouquet of flowers and a thank you note. And when I got to the event, this event had 5,000 people in it or something. It's a huge event. And so people were taking pictures with Tony at the end of the event. And I was just standing there and Tony's on the stage and he sees me standing out there in the audience and he looks at me and he points at me and he goes, you, I know what you did. Right? And I'm like, uh-oh, what did I do, Tony Robbins? And he comes off the stage and he walks down, greets me, shakes my hand. He goes, I know exactly what you did. I said, what's the matter, Mr. Tony Robbins? Aren't you buying flowers for your assistant and letting her know how, the gratitude and all this other stuff? He goes, it was a brilliant stroke. I appreciate you doing that. And that's how my relationship started with Tony Robbins.
Okay.
So fast forward, I help a man named J. Conrad Levinson, who wrote a book series called Guerrilla Marketing.
Yep.
So I help Jay improve his company. Jay introduces me to Chet Holmes. I become Chet's #1 producing coach for his company. Then they promote me up to president of training and sales. And I'm doing this. And then little did I know, Chet Holmes and Tony Robbins had been talking about merging. So Tony ended up buying into the business of Chet Holmes. And I ran that company for 7 years. Okay. And so during that time, I'm a numbers guy, Frank. So even though I am a sales guy, I look at metrics, I look at numbers, I look at how things are going. And so I started pulling through all the metrics of the sales process. Right. And the first thing I noticed on the front end of the sales process, because they were saying they were losing 24 or 27%, because the way it went, they were buying radio on Sirius XM radio and Sirius satellite and all this, and they were spending a tremendous amount of money would come in through a queue. We'd do a call, and then we would sell them into a $229 2.5 hour training.
Okay.
That 2.5 hour training then sold them into coaching. Right. So, and then from there, we'd sell them other services and so on and so on and so on. So the first thing I looked at was, why are they losing money on the front end and on this $229 product? Because the radio ads were expensive, right? I mean,
Right.
we're advertising on, you know, you name it, from at that time, from Rush Limbaugh to, you know, other celebrity type radio. You know, Howard Stern was one of our biggest
So when you say
producers.
you're losing money on that, what you're saying is the spend on the radio was
Yeah.
more than what you brought in at the $229.
Yeah. So if we're spending $100,000 a month on
Yeah.
radio, so to speak, we were only bringing in, let's say at that time, maybe $74,000 or so
Okay.
off those 229s, right? So, but I looked at the numbers, Frank, and when you look at the numbers, folks, the story will reveal itself, some story. So I was looking and I'm like, they got a 15.6% refund rate on this $229 training.
Okay.
And I was like, why? And that's the question you want to ask folks. Why? Right? Because then you start getting into the story. And so what I did is I listened to what the trainers were saying, and Frank, they were inviting the refund. So what they were saying in the presentation was, listen, we've gone through this, and by the way, it was an awesome training. I mean, it was worth like thousands, more than $229. And they were saying, listen, if you don't feel we've earned our money today, if you haven't got 100% plus value out of this call today, I want you to call 1-800, get a refund right now,
Okay.
and we'll give you your money back. And they would repeat it 2 or 3 times. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. So what I did is I looked at the presentation and I said, how can we alter that language, and let's test it.
Right.
And so when we altered the language, what I did is so these were open rooms, like there were maybe 30 people in the room that we were doing the training, and they were all CEOs, guys like yourself, Frank, very successful. And then I changed the script a little bit to go and say, so, okay, everybody, we're going to take 3 minutes right now, just go through all the concepts, write down how much, if you put these concepts in your business, how much would that bring to you over the next 12 to 18 months in your business, each concept. And we take a couple of minutes and go down through, and guys, we're going to add them all up. And then I'm going to ask you what that number is. And then I would go, Frank, what did you get for a number? And you might say, I got $484,000 on this call today. And somebody else might go, I got $7.2 million. And somebody might say, I got 660,000, and so on and so on. And so I taught them to add up all these numbers. And at the end, I say, okay, out of about 30 people here today, guys, we're adding on, we got $143,672,017. And then we used to use the Tony Robbins thing. Everybody go, woohoo, right? And everybody on the call would go, woohoo. And then we asked the question, I think we've earned our $229 today. What do you think? And everybody would go, yeah, of course you did. And that refund rate dropped from 15.6% to under 1% within 48 hours.
Wow.
So we're pushing more volume through the funnel at this point, right?
Right.
So the second metric I noticed is the sales team, the manager on the sales team. There were, over 2 years, 17,000 leads never followed up on.
Holy
Yeah.
cow.
Yeah. At $13 a piece, right?
So were they just too rich in leads, and they were just, couldn't separate the wheat from the chaff fast enough, so they're just calling what's looked hotter?
Well, that would have been illogical, Frank. I would have understood. So to
Yeah.
answer your point, right? I mean, that makes sense. Like, oh, I don't have enough salespeople, and we just overflowing with
Let's
leads, et
get
cetera,
the
et cetera.
hottest stuff now. Yeah.
No, that wasn't the case. What was happening is the sales manager was actually looking at these leads and going, nope, not qualified. Just throwing them in a bucket. Nope, not qualified. Throwing them in a bucket. It never made it to the sales team.
Oh my.
So what I did is I reinstated what I would call a dormant client campaign or a dormant lead campaign. And we started calling through these leads, and anyone who new coming onto the sales team had to call these leads and get them. But we started making more sales and more sales and more sales out of that front end. And what happened is just between those two things right there, we started almost offsetting 100% of that debt on the front end.
All right, so you had new salespeople coming in, and the first job was, hey, we've got all these leads for you.
Yeah.
You're calling the
And some,
dormant leads. It's great.
yeah. And some of these leads were 2 years old, but they were making sales. We literally had people go, what happened to you guys? Because, all of a sudden just communication went dead.
Yeah. So
Right.
how did you track that process?
On the leads itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we knew what the leads were. We knew, so they had a report. So we would give X amount of leads to these people and say, listen, there's 100 leads. You just keep calling and keep calling and keep calling, and prove your worth that you are good at selling on the front end of this thing. And if you make 2 sales out of this list, we'll bring it up. So we would track it right through the thing, and then so some people would get 14 sales out of that list.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now we've got more volume going in. And by the way, for all of you who are like going, oh, that's not bad. Think about this. This was lost revenue. Now we turned it into complete profit.
Sure.
Right. And so we offset that front end. And then what happened going through, Frank, is I looked through every single stage and metric on what these presenters were saying in this training call.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started optimizing each and every step. It took me a few months to do this,
Okay.
but the close rate went from 17.8% to 43.2% across the whole team.
So let me bring this back into context then. So what you're saying is when they did the $229 training,
Yes,
that was in itself a great product that was super underpriced and very, very good value. But from
yes,
there, you wanted to bring them in. That was the middle part of the funnel. You wanted to bring them into other
the coaching.
programs. And
Yeah,
you're
the
saying
coaching.
that close rate went up when you went through what the percentages are saying, yeah?
Yeah, so we were selling between a $4,000 and $12,500 program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was at 17.8% on the close rate. And then I got that to 43.2% across the presenters team
Man,
within 4 months.
man.
That never came down in the 7 years I was there. It
What were you
stayed
finding?
consistent.
What were you finding in what they were saying? How did you tweak that like that much?
So it's points of optimization a lot of times. Like, so what I do is I measure gross ratios and then micro ratios. So I'll give you an example. Um, I would look at the room sizes over the last 3 years. Now, back then, you didn't have AI or be able to do this with all these
Right,
things, right?
right,
So
right.
you had to do it manually or spreadsheets or
Hmm.
whatever. And I'd have like 12 spreadsheets worth of numbers, and for 3 years, and I'd roll up and I'd figure out exactly what the right titration of the room should be. So I would look and I'd say, okay, if we had a bad show and we had 6 people in the room, what would it close at? 7 people in the room, 8 people in the room, 9 people, all the way up to 30 people, right? And then what I did is I looked at the optimum numbers, like 11 closed really well, 12 closed really well. I'm remembering back. 18 closed really well, 23 closed really well, 27 or 28. I'd have to look at the numbers, closed really well. I mean, for those of you like can't remember, this was back in
Yeah, yeah.
2006 or 7 and 8, right? Um, so what I would do, Frank, is then we knew our approximate show rates. So what I would do is I would monitor the rooms, and once the room gets to this certain point, based on I know the show rate was going to be X, I would shut that room off and no one else could come in there. So we'd get the optimal conversion rate,
Okay.
right? So I was monitoring like air traffic control,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
monitors
Yeah.
the planes coming in, right? I was doing the same thing. And so then what I would do is I'd look at parts of the presentation. So Tony, please don't kill me. Or Chet's passed on, so he can't get at me. But Tony, I love you, always will. But what I did is I would test things like pulling Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes out of the presentation. I would completely, because they had 4 slides on Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. And I was
Right.
like, this seems too much, right? So I pulled them completely out of the presentation. and I started getting a 2.25% lift in actually conversion.
Okay.
And so I'm like, this is interesting.
Yeah.
And so Chet caught wind of that and he's like, put us back in the presentation. I'm like, no, it's converting better. And he's like, I don't care, put them back in. So then what I did is I put them back in. You'd see the numbers drop again. And then I'd start, I knew I couldn't pull them out completely. So then I started pulling parts of them out of the presentation and I dialed it back in when I left them in the presentation, but I only gave them one slide.
Mm.
It went up by 3% conversion.
Okay.
So I would look at every little slide, every little step, everything, and I would painstakingly just test and test and test. And then what I would do is I'd get the presenters together and I'd say, where are you running into this? Where are you running into that? What are the objections you're hearing? What is the language patterns you're hearing? I've got all the recordings.
Yeah.
And I would look at all of that and we would just piece by piece, Frank, I was taking things out and putting them back in over the 4 months. And sometimes we'd be working like 2 a.m, myself and the trainers, we'd be on the calls together and we'd just be pulling through all this stuff. And eventually we got the conversion rate to 43.2%. And it just kind of hung there. And then the other interesting thing is when we had companies who were spending over 5 million in revenue, not spending with us, but had $5 million in revenue, our percentages even went up. We were closing in the 60s. Pretty consistently on that group alone. So what I did is I segmented the presentation. One was for the $5 million plus, one was for people who are under $5 million. And we changed the language around a little bit because you speak, a company who's doing, $140 million has different challenges than a company who's doing $2 million, right?
Right.
Even if they're the same challenges, they talk about it differently.
Okay.
Then I segmented the audiences into groups. Then I looked at all our data across the board and what industries and what sectors were buying the most, who was buying full pay, who was buying part pay. And I started grouping like people together.
Okay.
So they would have better conversations, right? So all of these factors started contributing to the growth. Then we had a product set that we called the sales mastery system. I looked at the numbers. Companies under $300,000 were not buying the $4,000 to $12,000 product. Not a big surprise. They couldn't afford it.
Right.
They had a sales mastery system that they were selling for $895, and it was just a training only. And they were only selling about $86,000 a year of that program. And so I looked and I said, wait a minute, we got to do something with these under 300,000. So I called, I don't know how many of them, probably 100 plus. And I talked to them and I said, tell me what you're looking for. And they said, well, at our level, the training you're doing is just a little more advanced than we need. What we really need is sales. And I said, oh, we got the sales mastery system. Why didn't you buy that? Well, I really want coaching. So what I did is I took that same program. I added 6 weeks of coaching. We tested between 6 and 8 weeks. So we had 6 weeks of coaching. I raised the price to $1,450 from $895. And we sold almost $7 million that first year in that product.
Holy cow.
So
what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the message to people who are listening to this is the market determines, no matter what Steve Jobs said, he got lucky, in my opinion. Good lucky, but he got lucky.
Yeah.
You can't just force a product or service on the market in the way you want it. We have to actually go to the market and figure out what they want. And then we can deliver that. But once we deliver exactly what they want, the sales cycle is so short on that. I mean, it's like, a person in the desert wants water and you have water, they're going to buy it quickly if they have the funds to do it. So that's in part some of the stuff that I did there. And I went through a lot of the divisions. I got the coaching division, and instead of $1,500 in 6-month coaching packages, I got them to be able to sell 12-month coaching packages at $2,500. And so, the coaching division grew exponentially. So I just was going through each and every division with people and doing exactly what I'm doing for companies today, and did then. And, we grew from a few $1 million to a $27 million company, just doing that.
It's very cool. What's interesting, all of it is interesting. But one of the things that jumped out at me is the research that you're doing. So there's a numbers side of it, and when you dig into numbers, as you said, they tell a story that feels
Yeah.
very Jim Rohn-like to me for some reason, right? The numbers tell the story. And it might be the funny thing, I'll digress a minute, the Jim Rohn thing where he says, I go around to the salespeople and I'm saying, okay, so how many calls? He goes, I have a little chart in front of me, like graph paper. And I'm saying, so Doug, how many calls did you do? And I have my pen ready, and Doug says, well, Jim, the phone was this, and the sun was in my eyes, and the grass. And no, Doug, see, the reason I made the box so small is so a story won't fit in it. I just want a number. It was like my favorite Jim Rohn's quote of all time. But what's interesting is you went out to the marketplace where the product, the sales mastery product, wasn't performing, and you asked them, "What do you need?" And they said, "Well, the sales mastery thing is pretty good, but what we want is coaching." So now you combine those two things to an even greater product. So now your solution cost more than what your original offering was, but yet
Yes.
it did better because price is not what was holding them back.
Correct. Yeah. And in most cases, people, it's like, why is first class always full on European flights?
Mm,
Right. I mean, you know, my wife was born in Europe and we go back to Europe. And, every single time when I was dating her, every time I'd fly over there, first class completely full every time. These tickets sometimes were $6,000,
yeah,
to go to London. It's a 6-hour flight, right?
right.
It's like going from here to California, right? On the East Coast to the West Coast. But every single time it was full. Why? Because their clientele who buys first class is there and they'll pay more for it.
Yeah,
It's that simple. And so they figured this out on the airline side. And just like any industry, I mean, really, no disrespect to Mr. Musk, but is a Tesla really worth what they're asking for it? Not to me, right?
right.
I mean, so, $100,000 plus for no, but there is a market that believes that and perceives the value for them is
Hmm.
worth the investment. And there's always in every single market, there's always certain segments that are going to be, people talk about what the Pareto principle, like the 20, 80, 80, 20, right?
Hmm.
That, 20% of your customers will bring 80% of the revenue. But what people don't look at is within that 20%, there's also an 80-20 rule there. So there's really 4% of the market that really will buy super high end,
Okay.
right? And so, but they want something different,
Hmm.
right? Why is the Biltmore Hotel more money than the Hilton,
Well,
right?
part of it is they want a different experience, and some of it is identity. So,
There you go, on the
you're
nose.
selling into an identity, and that identity, doesn't wear, like I'm wearing a Welly Merrick watch. Very nice, NH36 movement, really good quality, heavy, whatever. It was like
Yep,
$100. It's not a Rolex. I don't
right.
see value in that. Now, I have a friend of mine that has very expensive watches. He sees value in that. And when he goes out in the world, he's a person who wears an expensive watch. That's part of his identity.
Yes,
I mean, so it's two levels, right? How do I identify? I only drink this kind of drink, this kind of beer, this kind of wine because I'm at that level of the game and I want to, that's part of my identity is I don't drink jug wine.
right.
And right, so part of my identity is I fly first class or I stay in only the finest accommodations. Other
Yes,
people don't have that same thing, right? Sam Walton in the pickup truck is legendary. The Millionaire Next Door is legendary.
right.
But within that subset, you'll find what those people value. And whether it's watches or shotguns or vehicles, everybody's got their hot button.
Yeah, and I think it's, the sign behind you, B2B is really P2P, right? So
Hmm.
person to person. And
Right.
we must know what that person is actually, their perception of value is on a business return on investment, on a personal return on investment.
That's a great segue to something that when we talked last week, I was dying to learn more about. and we talked about the McKay envelope company and how Harvey McKay had, what was it, 88 things, 77, I forget.
66. Yeah,
66,
66.
McKay 66, right? So I had plugged into my CRM, I customized, from the time I was using Act when it was on floppy disks,
Yep.
I created fields that allowed me what I refer to as Frankie's Fabulous 14, because once I read McKay's book, I'm like, I have to steal that idea. And, these are the 14 things I want to know about somebody. And
Yep.
I plug them in my CRM so I can have a more personal conversation. But you were talking to me about AI and gathering that data, and I'm super intrigued. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I can. Well, I mean, backstory with that same event at the Biltmore Hotel, I met Harvey McKay. And I walked up to Harvey during that, right after he was done with his talk, and he really inspired me. Um, and I walked up and I said, Mr. McKay, I just want to let you know this was an outstanding presentation. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. He said, well, what's your name, kid? And I said, well, I'm Doug Brown. And he said, Doug, very nice to meet you. I said, Mr. McKay, I have a few questions. Would you mind if I ask you? And he said, well, I got to go to my limo. So if you carry my bag, kid, you can ask me anything you want.
I love it.
And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to carry Harvey's bag and I'm going to get to talk with him. So I did. And we were talking about how do we make human to human type selling?
Right.
How do we make sales? Because, I said to him, I said, Mr. McKay, look, I've been selling a long time and I sell to C-level and I sell to all different levels. But what I really noticed is I'm selling to people, not to titles.
Sure.
And he said, well, that's exactly right. He said, well, I have this thing called the McKay 66 and I do all these fields and everything. And he told me this story, Frank. He said, I got a 7-figure contract by one of my clients that I had been pursuing, wasn't really giving me the time of day, but I was capturing all this information that you're talking about with your 14 fields
Hmm.
and he said, his son really loved hockey. And back then, the Minnesota North Stars, I think it was the hockey team.
Could be. Yeah.
And so he's like, the son got sick, had to go to the hospital. And so Harvey knew some of the professional hockey players, and he went and he hired a couple of them to go to the hospital to meet the son.
Mm.
And when the father got wind of that, Harvey said that the conversation re-engaged on the business, and we closed $1 million, $100 million deal, whatever he said. It was a big deal, right? And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start using this in my own stuff.
Hmm.
So like you, I grabbed some fields. And then over time, what I realized was the hardest thing for most salespeople is getting leads.
Yes.
That's the number one thing, right? Qualified leads. The second hardest thing for salespeople is follow-up.
Okay.
And so I wanted to solve that problem. And so I decided to create an automated proactive follow-up SaaS system to help people.
This is great.
And I'm like, all right, but follow-up is really communication. It's really person to person, right? It's
Right.
like, we can't just follow up generically. So long story short, how do we get this information and how do we utilize it? There's things all over the internet about people. Now, if we use, there's data scrapers, you could pull certain data down, but we can use that data and then we can have AI utilize that data and create personalized, meaningful, and relevant messaging for us. We can even have AI pull the data off the net. And there's so many places. So we created something, we call it an enhanced profile. And you just click a button, it'll pull all the data off everybody's profiles, legally off everybody's, like anything on your LinkedIn, we can get to, those type of things. Then what we do is we utilize the power of AI to analyze that. And even we can go as deep as looking at messaging that is out there that we can say, oh, well, this person writes like this, or so, they have these characteristics and personality profiles. So we can take the messaging and make it personalization, but make it relevant to them because it sounds exactly like how they would write as well, right? So we can massage the data that way. So, but utilizing the personalized communication, like, it's just a game changer for people because people like people who are like themselves in a lot of ways, right? We like to birds of a feather flock together, the old
100%.
statement, right? So yeah, you can use AI today to speed this. And Frank, it happens in like seconds. Like it's crazy how fast. I just did a thing out to a client, helped him in less than 14 seconds. We created a personalized, meaningful, relevant message to one of his. He was putting out a quote proposal for somebody, and we were able to secure the business just because it was so personalized.
All
The
right,
guy responded to it.
take your time here. All right, a couple things I got to figure out. So, one, you're talking about people who are like themselves. So, as an NLP guy, like Tony Robbins was, right?
Yeah,
I'm a certified practitioner of NLP.
yeah,
And what we learn in NLP is that we upload rapport building, right? We do it fast. That's the basis of NLP is we create rapport quickly, and we do that in a
yeah,
number of different ways. The things that you just said, right? You have a proclivity toward, um, let's say you are gustatory in your language, kinesthetic in your language, right? You're a person, you
yep,
say, yeah, I feel you, man. In
yep.
my gut, it's really not for me.
Right.
Right? So now I'm saying, well, that's your kind of language, as opposed to, I see what you're saying. It's clear as a bell. Now you're a visual talker. So I'm going to come back to you with your language, and
Yeah.
we're going to gain rapport faster than if you said, I see what you're saying. I said, yeah, I'm not feeling it. Now we're talking two different languages. People don't even
Languages.
realize that somehow that is slightly off-putting without really being off-putting. And then I get the stuff from folks all the time, but well, Frank, isn't that very manipulative and isn't it insincere? And I say no. It's like if I were going to China next week and I learned a few words of Mandarin. Isn't that nicer for folks if I'm speaking in their language? Like, why wouldn't I do that? So if I'm understanding what you're saying, so you're going to go out to my prospect, you're going to do a web scrape, a LinkedIn look, whatever it is. AI is going to gather what that person's kind of language profile, and you're going to incorporate that into your pitch to that person, and they're going to
Yes.
read it, and it's going to hit home better than if I come
Yes.
with my language. Holy
Yes.
crap.
Yeah. And to support your support
Woo!
the to support what you were saying, I used to do this in trainings, live trainings, and I would literally take. So you and I both know kinesthetic, verbally dominant, auditory dominant, right? And I would give two people who didn't know each other. I'd have them come up, sit down in chairs and talk to one another. And I'd say, you're going to use auditory words. You're going to use auditory words because you're both kinesthetic dominant. And they would talk and you could see them starting to lean in toward one another closer and closer. Eye contact was better, et cetera, et cetera. Then I'd say, okay, you're kinesthetic dominant, you're auditory dominant. You now speak kinesthetic and you talk these auditory, and I give them, a card, and you could see them actually pulling away from one another.
Yeah.
And then I would say, and then I'd find a couple of people who've known each other for like 20 years, and I'd put them back to back, and I'd do the same thing. They would sit straight and everything would be cool while it was, verbal to verbal or visual to visual, but the moment we changed that, I never forgot this one time on stage. Two friends who had known each other since like grade school. One of them got out of the chair and turned to the other one and said, "What the hell is the matter with you?" He was so upset when we gave him the opposite language of their dominant learning styles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I put them both in an opposite, I think one and then one in and then one out. The one that was in got out of the chair and turned to his friend and said, "What the hell is the matter with you?" Right. And I was like, wow, this is so powerful. And I love the analogy. Like if we were going to go to China, you're using Mandarin because you want to bond with that other
Sure.
person, right? It's just, we don't even think about it, but it's not manipulative to do the same thing. Like,
I know.
you and,
I think it's
it's,
considerate, Doug. I think it's considerate. I have a business partner, former business partner, who is a knee-jerk mismatcher. I mean, he's just whatever if you say, let's turn here, he's going to say, what about that parking space? There's just no way he cannot mismatch you. So the way that I have to speak to him is in knows, nots, can'ts, won'ts, and don'ts. And that's what I lead with. And that's not natural for me. But I'll say, hey, no way we're going to blah, 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 blah. And so-and-so can't blah, 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 blah. And, I don't like this about John because he doesn't. And then he'll say, oh, no, he can't. It's not as simple as what people revert to in pop culture as reverse psychology. It's a deeper thing than that, mismatching. But anyway, getting back to what you're saying. So you're gathering that personality language profile and you're pitching it back. Now, when you think, I'm thinking about you and the dormant leads. So if I take fast forward today and I take what you know about AI and follow up, because I have to let me put a pin in that 1 second. When people think about AI understanding their own language style and let's say cleaning up their email inbox and replying to things that sat dormant for a week or two, it makes their skin crawl. They're like, no, I'll get to my email. I don't need AI answering emails for me. But if you have incoming leads like you're talking about, thousands a day, or an incoming mailbox in a huge multinational company or telecom room or whatever, now talk to him about how AI can take this old dormant stuff and clean it up, and give me some of the finer points of that.
Well, one of the misconceptions about follow-up is speed doesn't matter, right? A lot of people think speed doesn't matter. And responding to a lead, for example, you mentioned leads coming in, right?
Yeah.
Responding to a lead is follow-up. People they don't think about it that way, but it's a form of follow-up. So studies clearly show that people who respond to a lead in a minute, or people who respond to leads within 5 minutes, the difference is 100% in difference in conversion.
Wow.
So again, I'm a stats guy. I look at numbers, right? And I don't believe stats. I validate these things, right? Because, there was one time back in our life period, where, eating, butter was bad for you. We had to go to margarine, and then, margarine was bad. You had to go to butter, right?
Yeah.
But speed to contact is absolutely essential. So if we have leads that are sitting there or communications that's sitting there, then let AI get something out for you, because it can take, your 100 emails, do this within a minute and have something, because something is better than nothing as long as it's relevant.
And something is better than something 5 minutes later. So let's be clear about that. It's not just something versus nothing. It's if my incoming if my inbound leads are overwhelming and big, and I can, as each one comes in, I can respond instantaneously. And we know, like I do a lot of work in office automation, and I can remember getting leads on copy machines. And every one of those people that you got a lead for, that lead went to 6 other people, 6 other companies. And first one in, first of all, they were all, crazy price shopping, right? But first one in had the shot.
Yeah.
You don't want to be fourth because you wouldn't. So what you're saying to me is speed counts and something's better than nothing, but I think something's better than something. If my AI responds in a nanosecond to that inbound email marketing lead, and you come 10 minutes later with something that you drafted personally, I win.
You do, because excuse me, the data clearly shows that 50%, approximately 50% of the people will work with the person who contacts them first, if a meaningful relationship is established.
Dude, that is huge.
Yeah. So and this is easy enough to do, Frank, because we can just set up AI or any automated workflow, right? The lead comes through, hits the queue, bam, automatically something goes out and it says, hey, even if it said, it does not have to be brilliant. This is what I want people to understand, right? I have closed deals following up with people that just reached out and said, hey, Frank, I was thinking of you. I hope you're having a great day. It's like, it seems Like it's not a business email. Like I literally was thinking about you, Frank, and I sent you that message, right? And then you respond back like, "Hey, Doug, I really appreciate you thinking of me. How you doing?" And then I picked the phone up and I call Frank. Hey, instead of us going back and forth on email, I just figured I'd give you a call.
Mhm.
And so, but if we had an automated thing that the lead hit and it went out and it said, you know, um, you know, hey, this is Doug. I got your message. I want you to know you're valuable. Here's a couple of reasons. I'm going to give you a call within 5 minutes. Right. If we did something like that and we had it set up in a queue that automatically said we got a call, or something that went out that, hey, would you like to schedule a time together? Maybe me calling you out of the blue is not convenient. I will call you. But if you'd like to schedule a time on my calendar, here's a calendar scheduling link for you. And if it just went out and you improved your odds
Yeah,
just by doing that,
yeah,
then you're going to get more set appointments.
sure.
And so the also things in motion tend to stay in motion. So
Mhm.
once we recognize an appointment is set in our calendar, we can do all kinds of things automated, right? We can send an automated AI video if we needed to. We
Sure.
can send a voicemail drop, right? It's just like calls and leaves. Hey, Frank, I got your appointment. I want to let you know I'm looking forward to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are all automated processes that we can do today that we couldn't do back
That's
in the
great
day when you
stuff.
and I were starting out.
Let me ask you something. What if I had, and I have a client that was just talking about this, I have a list of, X thousands of dormant accounts. They're stuff that salespeople had and lost and
Yeah,
still in the system because nobody ever cleaned up the CRM. How would
yeah.
I attack something like, because there should be value in something like that. No, if I could use
You,
an
you'll
automated process?
in on the low side, you should get a 3 to 5% increase in your revenue that year just out of that list.
Holy cow.
Yeah, yeah. It's so we've done things like we'll take a sales team and we'll say you've got to contact 3 dormant people a day.
Hmm.
All I want you to do is just send out a text to them or send out an email to them. You don't even have to call them. Just text or email and saying, hey, I realized you're a client of ours. I wanted to just introduce myself and see, you know, if you have any interest at level and,
Hmm.
talking about some of the new things we're doing. Just something as simple as that. Doesn't have to be fully personalized, take all this time. Every time we've done it, we've seen a 5% increase in revenue.
That's
And
huge.
yeah, and what does it take? Three texts a
Doug,
day?
what's the cadence of that then? So let's say I've got this dormant list. I'm your sales guy, and you say, "Hey Frank, I want you to call at least three of these a day." So I call all three, and I leave a message for all three.
Yeah,
What happens next? I call three new ones tomorrow, and when do I
yeah.
go back to those three? And do I go back with something different? And how many times do I go? Like, what does that process look like?
Well, if you wanted to set up a full campaign like that, what we would do is we would use multimodality, right? So you could either call first, then an email would go out and say, "Hey Frank, I want to let you know I called and I left a voicemail message for you," and et cetera, et cetera. And then I would, if I had their cell phone number, I would text them,
Yeah.
and then let them know the same thing, right? Frank, I sent something to your email. I don't know if you read your email or not, so I figured I'd send it to text. You're important to us, and we just haven't established a relationship over a period of time. We had a relationship. I'd like to, follow up and have a
And Doug, you
conversation.
could do a lot of this stuff without the salesperson's involvement. You could set it up,
God,
via,
yeah,
from AI and
yeah, 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 yeah,
automated
yeah.
process within Salesforce, Sales Chain, one of these CRM.
Any of those, as we continue to keep developing our stuff out, we're expanding it on our own system, and so it's
Okay.
it's it's that was a shameless plug for what I'm
I
doing,
love
right?
it. Well,
But
more
the
plugs.
uh,
You know your stuff, man. I need more plugs. Anybody listening should be hiring you. Come on.
so the so yeah, absolutely, because the more you can automate this. See, look, follow up is hard. It's just bloody hard because we have so many things going on in the day that we want to follow up. We want to keep communicating. It just gets deprioritized. And then, again, something in motion tends to stay in motion. If we're going in the opposite direction, it tends to keep going that way, right? I've even looked at studies that people, Frank, even people in high school, like they go and they look at like a Facebook group and they say, oh, this person's like, I should contact Joe or Donna or whatever. If they don't contact Joe or Donna, as time goes on, it clearly shows they get more reluctant to want to contact Joe or Donna.
Yes.
Right. So, and why do we want to do this? Well, I did another study. All right, we're driving down a nice road, right? Country road. It's beautiful. I don't know. We're on the back, country roads of New York, right? It's just, there's nobody on the road. We're just hauling along and we're doing really great. It's a nice day. Sun's out. Boom. The windows are down. I don't know. Bon Jovi's playing on the radio, whatever, right? And we're like, it's 60 miles an hour, but we're now creeping up and we're like, nobody's around. So I'm doing 70, 75, whatever, just having a really good time. We drive around the corner and up about a ways up, we see a police car around that corner. Yeah. Our natural reaction is, right? And we go, oh, and we'd step on the brake or we slow down, we let off. We're like, oh, please don't give me a ticket. Please don't give me a ticket. Please don't give me a ticket, right? And you're going by, and you go by the police officer and you kind of look in your little mirror not to, have the police officer come after you. And you're like, please don't come after me. No lights, no lights. And you just keep moving on past that process. The lights don't come on. You're about a quarter mile, you're down the road a little piece, quarter mile down the road. It takes the average human being after that quarter mile less than 60 seconds to speed up again to the speeding speed they were going, or even faster.
Wow.
So if we forget about a massive traffic ticket, if we forget about possibly going to jail within 60 seconds, what makes us arrogant enough to think that we had a meeting with someone 2 days ago and they're even thinking about us, right? Or we walk out of the buyer's office and, we can just send them a follow-up piece 3 days later, right? Because there are competitors coming in right after us in most cases. Mm. And 50% of those competitors will never follow up at all.
Right.
Right. Only on statistically. And by the way, if it's a cold deal, only 2% of sales happens on the first meeting, on the first contact. Right. Yeah, yeah. So it usually takes multiple contacts, 4 or more, in order for 90% of those deals to close. The average person after a meeting expects 3 to 5 contact points of touch.
Okay.
Out of those 5 contact points, they B2B, they're looking for 3 of them to be phone calls.
Okay.
So if people are not doing what people want them to do, and I, as the competitor, am doing exactly what they want to do, I could be less of a sales closer and still close the deal.
Right.
Than these other people. This is the power in human communication, exactly what you teach, right? I mean,
and knowing.
And if anybody doesn't get this, think I did this years ago. I used to do this. I haven't done this in a while. But when I was live in front of an audience and there were a bunch of ladies in the audience, I would say this: ladies, a gentleman takes you out on a date. You like him. He seems to like you. The date went amazingly well. How long does he have to get back to you before he's burnt toast and you will never talk to him again? Want to guess the answer, Frank?
2 days.
You would think it would be normal, right? 90+% of the audience says he needs to get back to me within 24 hours.
Wow.
The majority of the rest of the audience, the other 8%-ish or so, said 48 hours. Occasionally there's an outlier that says he's got 2 or 3 days. Mm-hmm. But almost 100% of the audience said if he doesn't call me within 48 hours, and they prefer within 4 hours
After a date.
after the date.
Wow.
So if a man goes home and it's, midnight or whatever, and they, drop the lady off, and he goes home and he sends her a text message saying something like, I really enjoyed our night together. I look forward to having future, communication with you, something personal. I really appreciate what we talked about at dinner, whatever. And he sends that within 4 hours. He goes way up on the scale,
Wow.
right? If he waits more than 24 hours, it starts to tail off. If he waits more than 48 hours, he's burnt toast. I once said in an audience, I said, ladies, if he waits 4 to 6 days, what happens? One lady, she yelled out, I'll kill him. Right? So I'm like, okay, let's,
Calm down. Calm down.
but the emotion, right? There's this emotion that comes out of people. So if we do special things on dates, Frank, right? If we want a relationship with someone special in our lives, we send them cards, letters, phone calls, video calls, whatever, right? We try to make that person feel special.
Mm-hmm.
We can do the same thing in a business context without the kisses, right? That type of thing.
Yeah, and understanding the difference between pestering someone and communicating with someone. So this idea of sending a message, one of the things that makes me nuts is salespeople that send a message that doesn't have any meaning in it. It doesn't have any value. Don't tell me you're following up. Hey, I'm just checking to see. No, 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 no. You need to have something substantial when you reach back out to me, and you have to think for a minute what that is. So I think that's important too. Like the frequency of communication matters, but the substance matters as well sometimes.
Without question. And you'd probably have more, a better feeling about that person instead of them beating around this and, trying to like dance around the process. If they just came out and said, Frank, I'm just giving you a call because I really want to do business with you. Would you buy
Yeah,
for me? Right.
right.
You'd probably have far better connection with that person because they're being straightforward. And that's the thing. Like there's a business return on investment and a personal return on investment.
Mhm.
And, because people buy for what I know for three reasons: solve a problem, get an opportunity or gain an opportunity, or or achieve a goal.
Mhm.
Right. And then they weigh this business and personal return on their investment. What do I got to put into this? And what am I getting out of this? And what most people do is they talk to the business return on investment only. And they're taking the people out of people component out of this, which is that personal return on investment, because and it struck me early on in my career when I was doing a pretty sizable deal, and the guy who was responsible for the deal, he looked at me and he said, Doug, I want you to know up front, if this goes bad, I'm not going down alone.
I love it.
And I was like, oh, he's more concerned about his positioning within the
Yeah,
company and his reputation
reputation.
within the
Sure,
company,
sure.
right? That's a personal return on investment. So
Hmm.
that's what started getting me thinking deeper and deeper
Sure.
about this process.
Yeah, that matters. And I want to swing back to AI for a minute. So as we're
Sure.
wrapping up, we're in for about we got a few minutes left, and I want to think about salespeople have this fear now of AI, right? There's
Yeah.
so many things that I can do in AI, and people are like, well, is it going to replace me? So if you're a commodity, if you're a commodity product and I can put you on Amazon, yeah, you're probably going to be replaced. If you are a rep that's dealing in, voice over IP systems, IT services, pharma, going out and talking to docs about, new treatments or even big machinery in that. So, you're the person that leases the equipment to the eye doctor, for argument's sake, these kind of folks. Why won't AI replace them? Why will AI enhance them in the ways you were talking about, managing data, reaching out, follow up, whatever, and not replace them?
Yeah. I want people to think about AI as workflow.
Okay.
That's why they fear it. They think it's this meanie thing that's going to come in and just replace human communication. And, we're all going to go back to the movie Westworld or something, years ago. Folks, if you don't know what it is, look up Westworld. It's a cool movie. And AI is really taking things that are an automated that are a process, and it can automate those processes. What people are thinking of, there's a difference between using AI and AI agents, right? So there's a difference between the two factors. One is I'm going to get something to do a process for me. The other is I'm going to get it to think more so for me, right? In a complex multi-person or complex sale, multi-person sale, AI doesn't have emotional intelligence or emotional quotient, right?
Yeah.
So it just does information, and it can analyze things, and it does it super, super fast.
Sure.
So I was yesterday on a call. I'm part of a company where it's an insurance business now, right? I'm part owner of it. And we wanted to lay something out. And so we took everything we wanted and we dropped it into AI, and we said, create a summarized format for step-by-step on how you would recommend laying this out. Well, if we had a human being do that, it would have taken days.
Yeah.
That thing was done within a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Right. And it came back so we could analyze that workflow. So think about AI more as workflow, because it's nothing to fear. It's just a new technology. Look, at one time, I'm sure someone said to their son or daughter, fix this steam engine, learn how to repair the steam engine. We'll be good for generations, right?
Right.
Now we don't even have carburetors on cars anymore, right? You can't even repair your car if you want to repair your car without a computer,
no.
right?
No.
So it's just another iteration of something. We must embrace it because it is a disruptive technology.
Yeah.
And we've had multiple disruptive technologies. The difference between AI technologies being disruptive and others, like the automated telemachine was a disruptive technology.
Sure.
But it really took about 13 years for people to really accept it.
Right.
Right? Because people thought, I put my money in this thing, is going to eat it. I don't get any receipt, right?
Yeah.
Right. But AI has been adapted now. It's like here now. It happened fast. And so, yes, it will replace some sales roles. Like I can tell you, I'm a guy that's helping people do that.
Yeah.
Right. We now have AI setters, and they do a really good job.
Wow.
So we can take, for 2 to 3 cents a minute of a phone call setter and replace somebody.
Wow.
Right. And so that is going to happen. It is happening now. So, however, if you want to make yourself competitive in the B2B world, in the field, understand what AI can do for you and embrace it, because what it can do is it can take the 30 whatever percent of your day that you're spending time doing things and allow you to spend that in front of clients versus doing all that routine
huge
stuff.
piece, right? So because with that, I love what you just said, all of it. And one of the things I'm taking from that is no matter how much of my time I free up by using automated processes and AI, it doesn't matter if I don't use that time for other things that make me successful, right? So that's a big deal too, is making sure that you're putting in the FaceTime with people, you're going to the networking events, you're joining the charity organizations and meeting people from all walks of life. You're going to different places where, my good guy interviewed for my book, Frank Fusaro, when he started his business, got a great personnel company. And when he started his business, he was only recruiting accountants. He was just getting accountants to take jobs at big accounting firms. And I said to him, well, how'd you start out? He goes, well, I went where they play. I'm like, well, that makes total sense. Where are the accountants? That's where I'm going to go. So when you get this time of yours freed up and you figure out where to spend time that you've now gained, then it's an exponential win.
Go back to the number one challenge people have, Frank, right? In selling. How do I get good quality leads? Well, okay. What are you doing for prospecting? If you can free up your day by 30%, you spend 20% of that day prospecting.
Yeah.
Now you have the time one has the time to prospect.
Sure.
You're going to get more qualified leads out of your prospecting if you're doing your prospecting correctly. So it's like, you want to go to the like you said, the places that people are going to be your ideal buyers and things like that. Like you're part of this Italian community that you were telling me about, and I looked it up, and amazing building. That building is beautiful, right?
Come to New York. We'll have dinner together there.
Yeah, I would love
Please
to.
do.
And
Come down.
And I saw in there that they had like a piano, a guy playing the piano, and recitals or whatever's going on. And I was like, man, I want to be part of this community, right? Because it's just, you just know they're quality people in this community, right? So this is what we want to do. We want to have AI working for us. AI is no different than an automobile when you really think about it. At one time, you had to walk to your appointment. If it was 20 miles away, you would spend a day going back and forth to the appointment. Then you got, I don't know, a cow or a horse, and you went back and forth. That was a new technology.
Yeah.
Then we got these, modeled whatever, Ford and Dodge Brothers going back and forth, right? The automobile. Then we had trains and we had all this. And we use this and we never even think about it.
Yeah. But
now it's like you can't even live in certain communities without an automobile because you can't even get back and forth, right? You and I can get from New York to New Hampshire in 4 hours.
Yeah.
Right? Like back in the old days, if I had to walk to New York, I'd be like, Frank, I'll see you in a few days, but you wouldn't even know I was coming because the letter wouldn't even get there faster than I could get there, right?
God.
So this is what I want people to understand about AI. It's another technology to adapt, to free up their time,
right,
to build better relationships and do the things that we can't do just because we're human beings.
Right. And then use that free time to do the human stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Go back to, like you said, the golf course. If you can close business on the golf course, play more golf.
All right, Doug. So what kinds of things, how do people get, this will be in the show notes anyway, but I'd like you to say it. How do they get in touch with you? What do you want them to get in touch with you for? What are the best things we can do with Doug?
Well, if they're interested in follow-up specifically, we run a masterclass once a month on follow-up. It's at ceosalesstrategies.com/stop the leak. And we because it is a leak in people's business. So stop the leak, ceosalesstrategies.com/stop the leak.
Okay.
They can reach out to me directly on my email if they want at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com.
Okay.
And we answer all inquiries. So I have people watching my email. So if they want to know more about me personally, they could go to my LinkedIn profile, Doug Brown 123. Just type in Doug C. Brown revenue growth. I'm all over the pages.
Good.
We also have we have a metrics type training that we do, Frank. Like if they hit the website, they'll see a short video on 11 metrics, but if they want, they can then download a 40-minute training for themselves just on the metrics and how to predictably grow their revenue. And they can just go to ceosalesstrategies.com and get that done.
Cool. This has been amazing. I feel like if it's okay, I want you to come back again because I think we have a lot more to talk about.
So
maybe I can get you back again, and we definitely want to do that dinner up at the club. It'd be great. I could pick your brain for days, man. Thanks so much for being so open, so forthcoming, and so filled with great information. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, thanks, Frank. This has been amazing for me too. I really appreciate you having me here. I'm very grateful.
Ready to take your sales team or event to the next level? Visit franksomma.com to discover how Frank can coach your top performers, deliver a tailored workshop for your team, or captivate your audience with a content-packed keynote at your next event. Frank's best-selling book, B2B is really P2P, is now available on Amazon and Frank's website. Here's a special offer. As a valued listener, mention this podcast when you contact Frank and receive a 10% discount on your first coaching session, keynote, or workshop booking.
that's a wrap.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Selling in the Age of AI. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of the topics we discussed, and of course, to connect with our amazing guests. I have to shout out big love to my production team, Neeks, Angelo, Nico of Digital Presence. You guys rock. If you want your digital presence to explode, check these guys out at digitalpresence.team. And until next time, remember, people can't point and click you. Be the difference maker for your prospects and clients.